Hi, everybody. I am here with the amazing Alan Jones, who's a founder and CEO of Bambi. Hopefully, y'all have gotten to dig into a little bit of background on Alan, but I'm going to turn it over to him to give his story from his words because I know he can tell it way better than me. But I know y'all are going to enjoy this conversation. As I mentioned before, Alan's definitely someone who knows small business owners, works with a ton of you in his own company and a lot of growing businesses as well. So I think great insights, certainly from him and his experience in growing Bambi, but also from the many companies he's worked with. So we've taken a lot of your questions, have aggregated those. You'll drop more in the chat as well if there's any thoughts or comments, and we'll be monitoring those along the way. So for now, I will turn it over to you, Alan, to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning. Los Angeles morning, at least. And thank you for having me. Let's see, where do we start? So first of all, my name is Alan. I'm the CEO and founder of Bambi. Let's go back, man. I think I got my start in technology after dropping out of college, and dropping out is putting it lightly. I think was I ever really fully attending? Nobody will ever know. But I was at a community college, and I got my first job in tech when I was 19, and as a product manager. And so I quickly moved from product, from being a product manager to being a head of product at a company called DocStock, which was an SMB focused kind of content platform that was acquired by Intuit. A few years after that, started my first company. So Bambi is my second time in the entrepreneurial journey. I keep coming back for more. I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. After my first company, I went on to be the chief marketing officer of ZipRecruiter. There were 20 people at the company at the time. My job was growth, and I think we achieved that. The company went public last year. And then 6 years ago, I left to start Bambi. So Bambi is really, really simple, right? I think you've got a bunch of entrepreneurs on the line, so I think they'll appreciate this. I saw a couple of problems. They were really big, and I decided I was going to spend the rest of my 30s trying to solve them. There are 5.6 million businesses in the U.S., 96%, small businesses in the U.S., 96% of those small businesses did not have an HR manager. The primary reason those companies didn't have an HR manager was because of price. Our thesis was if you could bring down the price through technology, to be able to access an HR manager, then we could create really fundamentally a new category. And enter Bambi, where you can work with an HR manager for $99 a month. We've raised $70 million, later stage Series C, 200 employees based out of Los Angeles, 8,000 active subscribers, and we're building to the moon.
Fantastic. And I mentioned before we have some Bambi customers in the mix here, so I know they're excited to hear your story as well. So Alan, today we spent with the group really talking about building their plans out, taking these high level goals and objectives and breaking them down into some of the project-based work and tasks and how they're going to delegate those and resource against those. I'd love to hear from you how you all tackle this. You obviously have a big company at Bambi, but how do you tackle your planning for the year? You've just come into 2023. What did that process look like for you
all? Man, it's a really good question. So let me first, I'll start with saying how we tackle planning this year, but then I'll back into my overall philosophy and approach around planning more generally. Context, discussion, conversation, those are I think the glue that holds any plan together, right? So you can put as many things into an Excel document as you want. You can put as many things into a PowerPoint presentation as you want, but if your core team isn't held together with the glue, the discussion, the conversation, the context, the plans don't matter. And so at the end of this year, here's how Bambi handled planning. Step one is the executive team goes away to a 3-day retreat where we spend 3 full days together recapping the year that we just went through, talking about all the things we did wrong, all the things we could be doing better, all the obvious areas. I have a thing that I say here, which is we're going to make a lot of mistakes next year. Let's just not make the same mistakes as last year, right? And so the rule is any of the mistakes we can identify that we have made previously, how do we make sure that we don't make those mistakes again in the future? And so you spend 3 days together. So that's A. B, we then come back to LA and we sit in a room for 3 more days and we plan the future. And all of that is, none of that's financial planning yet. That's just like, what are we going to do? What are we going to build? And all of that's going to change. But the point is, we are all lockstep in line with what is important for us to be working on. That's just, those roadmaps are then North Starred against what we call BCOs. There are only 3 big company objectives, and we set our BCOs for the year. And those are our North Star that should be guiding our plans as we execute. And then at the beginning of the year, we have what we call Roadmap Week, where the very first week in the new year, all we're doing is building the roadmaps. So, with our core teams, right? So 2 clicks down with our managers, with our directors, et cetera. Now, all of that is, that's where I am now. But like, how did I think about planning when there was like 5 of us? Forget about it. It's a waste of time too early on. If you have to plan what the next moves are going to be when there's only 5 employees, it means you've not done a good enough job locking people into the vision and the mission. At a team of 5, you usually, at least for me, the team should kind of know what the next steps are going to be. As you scale, planning becomes more and more important, and not planning enough can be a death nail. So it's actually this double-edged sword. Planning too much in the early days, I think, is representative of something fundamentally wrong with how you communicate with your core team. Not planning enough in the later days can mean that maybe you're not mobilizing the troops around the really big ideas.
How do you approach the prioritization? Lots of times there's competing priorities, especially for smaller companies where people are wearing lots of different hats. What are the things that you looked at, and particularly thinking about those earlier days? Where did you start to look at what needed to take priority over what when there were 50 things to do on your list?
Oh, I love this question because it's scrambling my brain into like a bunch of different answers. So here's a couple of things that I think are true. One of them is whether or not you're building a nail salon or a technology company, the fundamentals of your business always matter. And the reason I'm saying that is because I think sometimes, at least in tech, we think, hey, we can just grow and we can worry about the fundamentals later. We can worry about profitability later. We can worry about how long it takes to return the cash that we spend later. No, my dad ran a pager store in a mini market. My grandmother ran a dress store. My other grandmother ran a childcare center. At no point in their lives and career in those journeys were they like, we'll worry about how we make the money back later. For now, let's just spend it, right? Otherwise, I probably would not be here today. At least I wouldn't have learned enough. And so I think fundamentally thinking about what matters to businesses, period, is always important, right? What's my bottom line and how quickly am I making my capital back? Now, depending on the vertical you're in will change if there are other ancillary metrics you may want to care about, right? For us, we're a SaaS company. So numbers like ARR, annual recurring revenue, matter a ton, but they never trump other more fundamentally important numbers like profitability and time to pay back on cash, because cash is king. So for us, we think about, all right, could the business survive without another round of capital? And what are the scenarios our model needs to play out to make sure that happens? And then once we nail that, we're like, okay, now what do we want to think about in terms of growth? At the center of all of that, the nucleus of all those equations is what do our customers need, right? And specifically, what do our customers need that no other competitor can offer them? The more unique in the approach to that question, the more I think of a defensible moat you add around your value proposition and offering. And so we kind of split our roadmap every year into 2 groups. Like, what does the market already have that we think we can do incrementally better? And what doesn't exist in the market that we think we are uniquely positioned to offer that no one else can? And the duality of those 2 things, I think, builds a really cool enterprise.
So as you're thinking about road mapping, I get really tactical here for a minute. You have your
Yep.
roadmap week, you go through that plan. How are you holding yourself and your team accountable to that roadmap? What does that process look like for you?
So how am I holding the team and myself accountable is one piece here. Let me say another thing that leads into that. Part of the roadmap exercise is to let everyone get it all out. Part of it is like not wanting, good people and really great talent don't want to feel like they're working at a place where it's emperor led. Even though you are the CEO, you are the owner, you are the leader of the vision, and the primary kind of knight of innovation. That's your job. But part of our planning sessions are meant to let our core team get it all out. What are you thinking about, right? What are some of the things in your corner of the business as chief customer officer that I may not be aware of? Let's get it all out on the table. And then let's think about how we filter those things kind of through the vision of the founder and the business owner and the company's mission. And so sometimes, one of the little hacks in planning is even if someone's item doesn't get on the roadmap officially, it's at least on the backlog, right? So like their contribution is always represented in the company's future, even if it's not prioritized yet. So that's A. B, accountability. I set really high targets. And every year the team says, Alan, you're crazy. Alan, these targets no one can achieve these. Alan, by the way, they're right. They're right on all of it. Alan is crazy, and some of the targets are unachievable, but innovation happens under constraints. And so we set crazy targets because it forces us to think about ideas and ways to hit those targets that ultimately we would not have thought of if the targets were overly achievable versus overly unachievable. I always index on the overly achievable part. And then we set up metric meetings. So we have 2 steering meetings that we have twice a month where we sit together and we say, okay, how are we doing in terms of executing the qualitative items on our roadmap? And how are those qualitative items on our roadmap hitting our quantitative goals that we've set? Were we right or wrong about we thought X would bring Y? Did it? How wrong were we? How right were we? Should we actually deprioritize the next 3 things because we're having so much success with item number 1? And so it's a bit of a rolling process and held accountable to targets and metrics to make sure that what we said was going to happen is actually happening. I think the most important thing here is humility. None of us know. I don't know. I've just got some experiences. I think I have some good ideas. I think my experiences are going to lead the company in the right direction. But more important than me being right is having the humility to realize when something we said was going to move the needle doesn't quite do it, and then moving something else up in its place. Does that kind of get at the question that you're asking?
Yes, I love that. I love that flexibility from the plan. I think it's so easy to get sort of married to a plan where it's difficult to get away from it, or to not have a plan at all, which is also difficult. There's like the 2 ends of the spectrum that can be really dangerous. And so I think there's a great key there that's important to recognize. You have to have that flexibility and build that ability to sort of pivot and adapt into the structure.
Yeah.
So walk me through, one of the things we talked about was the idea of building in kind of a little ritual and ceremonies into company. Things like there's natural highs and lows in your company. If you fail, what do you all do? How do you handle it? You talked a little bit about some of the things that you do. If you succeed, what do you do as a company? And what are some of those, I guess, traditions at your company that you've woven into Bambi?
Oh man. Okay. Love this question too. So, companies are teams and communities. Teams and communities create their own philosophies, no matter how you look, right? Whether it can be, ethnic communities, musical communities, sports teams, they create their own traditions, and some of them are natural. And some of them are kind of created, intentionally. And those philosophies and the phraseologies you use, they can help to package and represent your core values. And so in moments of kind of failure or seemingly taking a loss, teams look to some of those coined terms to shape how they should feel about the loss that we just took. I am well known inside of this company for making up terms and then packaging those terms and branding them. I actually think it's really important. I'll give you a couple of really good examples. Thoughtful optimism, which is a term that I've coined here at Bambi that we have then packaged and defined. Thoughtful optimism means that you don't believe that all problems will fix themselves, but you do believe that all problems are fixable, right? It's like, oh man, for example, my toilet handle, my house broke. I'm like, oh man, it's not flushing. Well, just blind optimism would be like, it'll eventually start working again. It's not going to start working again. But I didn't panic. It's fixable. I sent a text. I called the handyman. He came in and he fixed it. And it was water under the bridge. It barely bothered me at all. And I know that's a funny example and I'm being, a little cheeky, but the point I'm making is all problems are fixable, and creating terms to represent that philosophy helps the team, hold on to something. Another one is broad outcome objectivity. What does that mean? It's a bit of a mouthful. It means that you don't care where the right answer comes from. If you're in marketing, you don't care if product has a solution. If you're in sales, you don't care if we get to growth because the marketing team had a better month than you did in sales. If you're in customer support, you don't care if typically this type of question is something that tech support is supposed to answer. It's not really in your job. No, broad outcome objectivity says no matter where it comes from in the company, so long as it's good for the customer and the business, then I'm in, right? Then I'm in. And so those are just different ways to kind of set the team up to think about things the right way. Now, a couple rules here. You can't, force feed a new language to someone in a single day. So I typically try and limit these packaged philosophical nuggets to a couple, to one or two a year or one or two every 6 months that we then print out, talk about, and then you hear, at the coffee cabinet, you hear someone saying, well, you got to have thoughtful optimism, which makes my day. And so I think giving the team language to understand how to think about failure is almost more important than trying to avoid the failures altogether. It is more important because you can't avoid it. And so I have found that to be helpful for us.
So you're an incredibly optimistic person inherently. I think that is very obvious for those who meet you. Regardless, I'm sure there are down days, down weeks, down months. How do you keep the momentum going personally? How do you keep yourself kind of pushing forward, thinking about the next, when things aren't necessarily on track?
Yeah, it's hard, right? And it's, I think for any founder, and it's really not just founders. It's like whenever you have something that you are so, I don't know if we can curse here, but I'll say freaking passionate about. It's like whether you're a tennis player, a violinist, an artist, a singer, a founder, or a head of customer service who just obsesses over systems. Whenever you kind of intersect what you do for a living and passion, the beautiful part of that is there are two outputs. One of them is fulfillment, but the other output is unavoidable disappointment. And figuring out how to, be fulfilled and disappointed almost on a regular basis in tandem is the freaking, it's difficult. And so what I have found is the following, and I discovered this during the pandemic. So I was a dude that could, I was CMO of a company at 26, right? Of $1 billion company at 26. And it was so much fun. Oh my God. We're driving growth. I had a really big team. 60% of the operating team reported to me. And I looked at this as like, oh my, work is just fun. Until you become CEO again, and you realize that, fun has to take on a new meaning. And at the peak of the pandemic, we found ourselves with teams completely working remote. And this is before we had figured out systems to make that work successfully. And so we went from being in office to totally remote. We had to, part ways with a number of people because there was no venture capital deploying money into the ecosystem. And I found myself feeling fairly underwater, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and not feeling the sense of optimism. More importantly, not feeling any semblance of joy in the job. And so I had to ask myself what I wanted to do. Did I still want to be the CEO? Did I still want to run the company? Which is a question I think every founder gets to ask themselves. And whatever the answer on the other side of that, there should be no shame. If the answer is no, then the answer is no, right? Because your life and your joy is much more important than whatever it is we're building here. And that's coming from a guy who absolutely loves his company. And I decided that I did want to be CEO, and that I did love this job, and that I did love this company, but I had to figure out ways to get through the troughs. And I implemented a few things, fitness, sleep, and food. And because I'm a crazy person, I also completely cut off alcohol. So I don't drink at all. Why? Because I needed the capacity to be able to do this job and find joy in it. And temporary kind of numbers weren't helping me build capacity. They were just helping me numb the stress. And so I couldn't have the normalcy that my friends do. We're like, ooh, stressful Friday, happy hour time. It was always stressful Friday for me. So then what do you do? And I found that yoga 4 days a week, that 7 hours of sleep every single night, and spinach, like vegetables, like what I put in my body matters a ton, almost as much as any pharmaceutical, we'll take an antibiotic because we have an infection, but we discount the impact of a vegetable or or good carbs on our bodies. And so for me, I had to become a machine. To be honest, the person that I tried to mirror a lot of that against was Serena Williams. So my partner is a great tennis player, loves Serena. I now love Serena. I didn't know much about her before. And so I cannot play tennis, but she has a lot of good practices that I've tried to apply.
Serena's one of our investors, and I'm a tennis player, so big fan of Serena as well. That's awesome. And spinach for the win. I love that. Great.
Spinach for the win, man.
Great advice. So one of the things, Alan, when I first heard you speak at the QED CEO Summit, was that when you ask people for a solution, that you have 3 parameters. You get no new time, no new money, and no new people to achieve the goal. How are they coming up with solutions within those parameters? Can you talk a little bit about what that means in practice, how that came to be, and your philosophy on that?
Yes. A story just came to mind, and I have no idea if it's related, but I'm going to say it, and hopefully it connects. When I was a kid, my grandma we lived in Linwood, California, in a lower working class neighborhood and a lower income working class neighborhood. And everything you gave my grandma for Christmas, she would say, "Oh, I'm going to use that." You buy her pots. She'd put the pots away, and she's like, "As soon as I move into my new house with more space, I'm going to use these pots." And then you buy her new dishes, and she'd put it away. She's like, "Oh, as soon as I get the new house, these new dishes are going to come out." One year we got her a treadmill. She never opened the box. She put the treadmill in storage and said, as soon as she moves into the new house, she's going to have space to work out. I haven't thought about that story in years. You're just it's just excuses. You're looking for the next solution, looking for more space. Guess what? She moved into the new house. The new house happened to be smaller than her old house. So what do? All that stuff kind of just never got utilized. And there is the power of now with the team you have now is usually going to lead you to the best possible way to build a solution for your customer and your business. Everything is possible with $1 billion, right? Unless you've never managed money and somehow you overspend the billion and the thing that you've been waiting for to do in the world somehow never happens because you had never built the discipline of how to do less with more. I mean, that is just, you talk about these people that win the lottery. I'm not trying to talk about people that got luckily rich, but let's do it. People that win the lottery, a lot of them end up being poor again, because money management comes from good practices. Now, that's one side. The other one that is just true is, man, there are these isms, these phrases that I used to think were like cheesy bumper stickers, and I love them now. Like the one, diamonds are made under pressure, something like that, right? It's true. It's true. As an entrepreneur, if there were no constraints, the idea, the product, the value proposition, the thing that you're talking about doing would have been existent. All the ideas would be out there already. Constraints drive innovation. Constraints drive creativity. Constraints like, okay, I only have these four walls. What can I do? Without your constraints, you can't innovate. So the only thing that's separating us from the non-innovators or who's more creative under pressure and under constraints, you or the other person. Everybody could do what you're talking about doing with $1 million, right? But what makes us special is being able to do it with $100. And so I try and bring that same philosophy through our team. Hey guys, we need to hit $20 million this year, $40 million this year, and you cannot ask for more time. You cannot ask for more people. What was the other one, Carolyn, that I said?
No more money.
The money buys time and people, or buys the people, but no money, no time, no people. 80% of the time, the thing that they said was impossible, they figure out a solution to. And you didn't have to spend another dime to get it. All you did was help your team build the muscle memory that they can create genius under constraints.
I love that. I love that perspective on constraints. And I think it's one of the things that it's so easy to have the perspective that I don't have as much money as this other company, or I don't have as many people, or I can't do these things. And I do think that's a huge divider of those who grow and those who stagnate, is the perspective through which you look at it. Bootstrapping can be an incredible gift in those early days because you learn so much. Talk to me about.
Can I add one thing to that? Just like the negative side effect of that sometimes is it can rob you of thinking big, right? Because you're so constrained. And so like what I've had to get good at is still thinking really big, but then only about the bricks that I'm putting together today. Really big over here, and then the bricks that I'm putting together today. Sometimes you can be overly tactical. Constraints can make you overly tactical and nervous. And figuring out how to make sure that doesn't happen, I think is the key to being a great entrepreneur. But sorry to interrupt you.
Now, how do you personally carve out space in your schedule for you to think big? And I think this is another thing that, as we discussed, you think really big, but also knowing where you need to dive into the weeds and where you need to get involved versus where you need to delegate.
Yeah, I still struggle with that. So after running these small companies, my dad went on to become an electrician, and my mom's a nurse. And so like I'm a blue collar kid, I'm the first person in my family to build a tech company. Like there's, I'm a lot of firsts for the Jones family. And Carolyn, what was your question again? Why did I forget it?
As you're carving out time to think big, but then deciding also where you need to take time to dive into the
Oh yeah. That's why I'm talking about my dad's job. So, it used to be, and because of that, I used to think about my output only being valuable when I was behind my desk. It was really hard for me to break that, what I call kind of blue collar mentality, which is like taking a vacation can actually be good for my company. And like that seemed like a lie, right? And I would say it out loud to myself, but secretly I wouldn't believe it. It took me years to realize that when I step away is when I step into my most creative place. And being here is sometimes about executing on the creativity that you were able to have blossom once you stepped away. For me, it took years of seeing that play out in reality, right? Taking a trip and then coming up with something that fundamentally changed the trajectory of the company. Doing yoga in the morning, and at the end of my yoga session, 90-minute Bikram yoga session, while meditating, having a thought that fundamentally changed the trajectory of the company. Space ends up being the place where the new pictures can be painted. And when you're here, you're actively painting the picture, right? Your hands are on the brushes. You're doing it all. Sometimes putting the brushes down and then stepping away, you see the ideas kind of pick up in the background. How do I do it? I force myself to take vacations. And a vacation does not have to mean I'm going on a 4-week backpacking trip to Bali, right? A vacation can be personal time where I get on the train in LA and I take a 2.5-hour train ride for $20 to San Diego. And then I, sit on the beach for a day and maybe take it back the same day. So I think looking for ways where you've seen those patterns of breaks really drive value can help you internalize their importance. And then once you've internalized the importance of something as an entrepreneur, it becomes really easy to prioritize it. I think it's the lack of belief that a break is going to be helpful that makes us overwork and burn out.
Yes, that's really, really good way to look at it. And I think a mentality that is hard to, we're like geared to work and move, and it seems like there's always this race against time, especially as an entrepreneur, right? Because you're watching, I would say we're racing against cash flow, right? It's this constant, like, how can I move faster than that money is moving out the door, which puts a lot of pressure on everybody to try to do more faster. But sometimes those breaks actually are the thing that's going to accelerate it all.
Yeah.
Thinking about resourcing, I want to shift over. Obviously, you've got a lot of experience in the HR space. As you're thinking about hiring and you're starting to plan out the next quarter or year, how do you think about staffing? Again, how are you thinking about team building? Where do you actually invest the team into the team? Where do you hold back and put those constraints in place? And what ultimately drives that decision?
Oh, okay. I'm going to say some controversial stuff. Not everybody is right for your company. Let the ones that are unsure go quickly. And I don't mean fire them, just have the conversation. One of the things we've had to learn is, and I say this thing all the time, which sometimes gets some jeers and sometimes gets some cheers. Bambi is not a government service, which means its access is not for everyone. The DMV is tax funded and we all get to go use it, but that is not the same thing for employment at a private company. We are unique cultures that have the right to build and paint into our unique culture. We do not have to be for every single person. The clearer you can, now, by the way, that is not an excuse for an abusive workplace. That is not an excuse for toxic work cultures. That is not an excuse to overwork people and not pay them what is fair being defined by what you can pay and what they can do, right? That's all table stakes. Be a good human. Okay. Be a good leader, have high moral standards, all that is table stakes. Now, everyone's not for you. The more clear you can be about that at the top, the better at the bottom, the better you're recruiting at the top. And so that is how we think about it. So what does that mean actualized? Bambi is an in-office work culture. That doesn't mean remote work doesn't work. Carolyn, you have an amazing kind of full remote workforce, and you guys have figured out that works for you guys. And I think, if I'm right, you guys were doing that well before the pandemic, right?
Yeah, we've been at least a hybrid model prior to the pandemic.
Hybrid, yeah. And so you guys have found what works for your culture. I am a founder that likes to be in person. I just do all the time. Not some of the time, all the time. I love being here. My office is beautiful. It's cool. We don't get to, I didn't build Nikes. So I don't have a physical product. Our office is a physical manifestation of some of the stuff we're building. And that's really important to me. And so last year, in the tightest labor market that tech has ever faced, I decided that I was only hiring remote people because I'm crazy. And it made it very difficult to find talent at the pace that we needed to find talent at the quality. But that was a philosophical viewpoint that I had. And I wasn't making it up and I wasn't changing it. That's kind of just where I was at. So I think the other thing is you can't be afraid to push your philosophies on the culture. In fact, you should do it as a founder and CEO because they're looking to you for leadership. They're saying, hey, what should we believe in as a team, right? And that doesn't mean that you're brainwashing folks, but people want to be led by people they trust to empower to lead them. So that's important. We've also done a few things that are helpful. We've broken our hiring philosophies into what we call our 8 characteristics. There are 8 characteristics that every leader is scored against to decide if they're right for Bambi. And I won't, go into every single one. But one of them is, humility and then confidence, right? It's like be humble first and then be confident right after that. And that's important because all your leaders in the organization are top down, right? It's like they're going to hire folks who think like them. So you have to hire people that align with your cultural values. And then I think the last is expect people to be grown up. Listen, in tech, we pay people a lot of money. It's not crazy. We don't need to babysit you. You should be able to do your job. You're really grown, you're an adult and you're good. And so we shouldn't have to micromanage everything you do. But those are just a few things off the top.
You talked about setting the tone as the CEO of your company, that you're really the one that's driving a lot of the direction. How do you determine how much of that are you putting out there for the team to absorb versus how much are you collaborating with to build? And I think this is a hard spot sometimes for founders and for entrepreneurs to determine is where are they drawing that line? Because you can't certainly lead through a full organization, but you also can't determine everything yourself. You have to have buy-in. How do you draw that line?
Is this mostly related to, in terms of talking to the company about philosophies?
I would say both philosophy and planning and where you're spending time in it. I guess where you're spending time and energy and how you're spending that time and energy, perhaps both.
Okay, great question. So I do think it depends on the unique makeup of the founder. If you are someone who, maybe was in HR before, but you're building a company that heavily relies on product, then then it's important that you hire amazing product people who know more about that thing than you. I happen to have been an operator and I've run customer service organizations, account management, sales, marketing, and product. The only things I had not run before Bambi in some capacity were HR, finance, and legal. And so what that's to say is my unique makeup makes me a general operator across a lot of the R&D functions in technology. And so because of my unique makeup, I kind of set the tone in quite a few different areas of the company versus kind of passing it off. But I also think here's what I really think. You know what?
Tell us what you really think.
Yeah, I think there's like an over, people try to be so democratic and oh yeah, everyone has a voice and da 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 da. You know what? If everyone wanted a voice, they would have started their own damn company. They joined your company because they trust your voice. And so and so sometimes pushing off some of the decisions of where to focus on them is an abdication of responsibility, the core responsibility that they even joined your company for. And so I think there's this, it sounds nice to be like, yeah, everyone kind of collaborates and we decide. Yeah, they can collaborate on the how, but they're here because they trust you to give directives on the what, right? What should we do? Where should we go, right? And sometimes how should we get there? But good teams can normally formulate the how better than you can at scale, but you should never let go of trying to formulate the where and what. And so I'm not shy about telling my team that we're going to go in a certain direction across every single damn team in this company. Now, what I get in return is a lot of trust. They trust me. They know that I'm not going to come step on their toes for no reason. So I am really involved in a lot of decisions. Now, that has a downside, dude. The downside is you're like, man, I do not want to have to approve X, Y, and Z. You don't need to ask me, head of customer service, if it's better to answer questions over phone or chat when the thing that matters most is speed. Whichever option gets you there faster and gets the customer help, that doesn't need to be approved by me. And so the downside of the approach I just talked about is being really inundated with approving every single thing inside of the company and not empowering the team to make those choices themselves.
That's a really interesting perspective and great way to look at that. I'm curious where you decide when you're gonna dig deep, and you're the type of founder that digs deep, right? You stay very high level, but you're also going deep into the weeds in certain areas of your company. Typically, if you're going to jump in on an area, maybe something that's stumbling a bit, or you feel like you need to do some cleanup or change a strategy in a certain area, how are you balancing the high level, big strategic things that you need to do with digging in the weeds, getting a little bit more involved in the operational side, and then snaking back up? I often think about it as we're sort of snaking up and down through a process. Mm-hmm. What does that look like for you and at Bambi as a whole?
A good CEO, founder aside, at least in my view, has really a main function at all times. And it is to set the tone of the organization and to set the pace of the organization. And so when I get involved, it is because I think something is off tone or something is underpaced, right? And so I am mostly not involved. If I swing into a meeting that I wasn't invited to about a really important topic, it's because it's the 6th meeting and it's 3 months later and nothing has happened. And maybe you don't realize the urgency, so please allow me to come and demonstrate the urgency. And normally what I'll do is I'm not, like, the team is great, they're smart, they're hardworking. Normally what I'm doing is I'm jumping into this session and I'm cutting out the fat, right? I'm saying, tell me what the goal is. Well, we're trying to figure out this new product line for small businesses to hire their first employee. I'm like, okay, great. What have you guys got so far? Well, everyone's talking. Someone's saying this, someone's saying that, something like, okay, great. It's like democracy. Like, the beautiful thing about democracies is they're slow because everyone gets a voice. It's inherent in the process. So when you over democratize your processes at a company, you should not be surprised when they're slow. It's like, you can't mimic a system only for the good parts and expect the bad parts to somehow just fall out. So, I normally go into these meetings and I say, okay, great, give me a marker. I'll take a marker and I'll sketch the wireframe in real time. It's 4 pages and they all have buttons and a headline. So let's just unparalyze the creativity very quickly. Here is the wireframe, and I'll say, any questions about the wireframe? People will have questions. Great. I'll insert some of those in, right? Any reason why this will fail? No one has anything. Fantastic. This is the direction. See ya. Right. And I leave the room, and somehow I have unparalyzed the team to snowball into action. The outcome of that is still a fully realized product that is all theirs, right? All I did is come in and grease the track. And so I think for us, for founders and CEOs, pace and tone. When something is off pace or off tone, you have every right, regardless of the department, to get involved and change it.
Great example too. There's so many times I think that when you're trying to pull people through, and we see this a lot with founders, right? They're trying to sort of pull people through and help them get to the outcome. Sometimes it is so much faster just to spell out high level. Again, there's a lot of details, to your point, that still need to be worked out inside of that, but high level, give the outcome you're looking for and let them work out the process to get there.
Yep.
So I want to give a couple of just quick fire questions to break things up a little bit. So I'm going to ask you a few things, and then there's a couple questions too I've been pulling from the chat over here. What's the first word that comes to your mind when you hear the word entrepreneur?
Maniac. That's the first word. There you go. I'm not going to package this shit. So,
if you could be if you could put a business growth slogan on a T-shirt, if you could be a business growth slogan on a T-shirt, what would that be?
do your best, do it fast, smile at the end.
I thought you were going to have a made up Alan Jones-ism on the a word on there, but I like that.
Well, I just made that one up right now, so I think that might be it.
When you think about the qualities that have led you to success? You've grown a great, huge company. You all were one of the 2022 best employers. Obviously, a great culture, great company with lots of good growth metrics. What are the qualities as founder that you attribute your success to? And then what do you think others would say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the, I'm on this lifelong pursuit to be honest. And honesty, like, it means a bunch of different things, but figuring out how to tell someone a truth that is really hard in a way that resonates but doesn't hurt is really difficult. And I think for me, the people that I respected the most as I was kind of on the ascend and even to today are the ones that are the most authentic. The ones that make a couple of mistakes and then tell you where they made the mistake. And honesty, I think, is really the crux and the nucleus of incredible leadership. And so, I try and hold this team together with the truth. And sometimes that truth is, years ago, that truth may have been, hey, if we don't hit this metric, we're going to run out of money in 3 months. And, I think, we're hopefully, God willing, whatever God you believe in, long past that outcome. But many times for us, that was true. And so I could have either held all that in and told people, hey, packaged all these reasons why urgency was important, or I could just tell them the actual reason it was really important. And I've used that as a thread throughout this organization and really throughout my time as an operator. At ZipRecruiter, the reason folks loved when I got up at the all hands is because you knew you were going to get the real deal. I was going to tell you what was going on. That is where loyalty is truly, like, people love to win. That is true. But people also love knowing that they can trust you inherently. If you ask me a question at a town hall, you will either get one of two responses. You will either get one, you will always get the truth, but you'll either get one of two versions of the truth. A, you'll get the answer, or B, I'll say it's none of your business and I'm not telling you that. Which is also true sometimes. And the team's like, all right, I tried, like, hey, Alan, how much money do we have in the account? I'm like, it's none of your business. Like, next question. And sometimes they'll laugh and they're like, hey, we tried. But the honesty there, they know I'm going to give it to them. And so I think honesty is really the key there.
When you think about that level of honesty and transparency, what does that mean externally to your customer base? What do you share? What do you not share? How does that carry over?
Man, the truth, it's a good question. No one's ever asked me that. Not enough. I think it is always our first instinct with building companies is that your customer expects you to be perfect. And what I've been blown away by Bambee customers is every time we're honest about, a process we tried that didn't work, that may have ended in longer wait times for them or something like that. Every time we're honest, I think specifically because we serve small businesses and they're folks just like us. That level of transparency is always met with a tremendous amount of affection. It is when we try to market and position our way out of an error or something not working as well as it could have is when, folks are unsatisfied. So the truth is, to your question, we have not been transparent enough with the difficulty of scaling a technology company that offers an HR manager for $99 a month for the smallest plan, which is really accessible, really hard to build a model that scales to that. And we've tried our damnedest to stay hyper affordable. even when investors and the market has been saying, Alan, you can charge more money for this product. Alan, maybe if you move up market and you go sell to companies that have 250 to 500 employees versus the ones that have under 100 employees, you can charge more money and that'll get your profitability faster and that'll get you to, and I have been dogged in my pursuit to make this accessible for the smallest of the small. And that has come with some problems. And we've not been transparent enough, I think, about that. So thank you for that question. It actually is something I get to take back to our team.
Well, I have two questions on the theme of transparency. The first is about you. What's your biggest weakness as a founder, and how do you mitigate that?
Now I know how it feels in interviews when I ask people, what their biggest weakness is. They always say, I care too much. What is my biggest weakness? I am terrible at estimating how long something's going to take. And I am terrible at estimating how complex something is going to be to get an outcome. I look at something and I'm like, yeah, that can be done in 3 weeks. Let's do it. And then I stack our annual roadmap with 56 things that I decided could be done in a week's time. And I'm almost never right. And I can't seem to make the adjustment to be more right. And I'm nervous to even try because I think my urgency is part of what has made the company great. And so the real conundrum is, how do you take something that you believe to be a core competency and a gift that is also a detriment, and then calibrate that in a way that is helpful to the organization and not harmful? I don't know yet, but I've not learned it.
I was known at my company for a very long time as always saying, can we just get this done? It'll take 2 seconds. It'll take 2 seconds. Everything. They're like, nothing takes 2 seconds.
I know.
I'm going to get you a shirt. It'll take 2 seconds. I'm like, we can get this done.
I know.
All right. My second question is, when you think about where Bambi, we have a lot of small business owners that are listening, many with HR needs, but where do you feel like Bambi honestly delivers a differentiated value to the market?
Oh man, when you're running a company and 90% of the problems we deal with end up being people related. They end up being related to our team in some way or another. Coaching up star players, retaining the best talent, coaching out people who are not right for the organization, building incentive structures in a way that really inspires sales teams to reach their best. Go on and on and on. And this doesn't even include the list of things that are like making sure you pay the right minimum wage for the job so that you don't break a regulation, making sure you do the paperwork correctly so that if someone's going on maternity leave or a leave of absence in any way, you do it the right way. Like that's there's the cultural stuff. And then there's just like, hey, I need to make sure I don't break a regulation. Not knowing how to do those things can really render even the most innovative founder pretty full of fear and then eventually paralyzed in decision making. Bambi solves that problem. It is our HR managers who are fantastic. They talk to business owners about the scariest problems that they have in their organization because they're also damn personal, man. It's your company. You put everything you have into that business. You put $100,000 into it over the last 2 years and you have nothing left. And you've got someone potentially talking about suing you for maybe a mistake. You accidentally paid them the wrong wage and it was truly an accident. What do I do? Maybe without us, you would have done something that only increased your likelihood of losing more. We are the therapeutic solution to that part of the founder's psychology and spirit. And so that is, I've never actually phrased what we do that way, but at our core, that's really what we do.
super interesting way to think through the value. I think so many times we think about sort of the core solution and service set, but I think the way that you present that is much more critical, certainly, to every single business owner out there.
Me too.
What is next for Bambi? What are you most excited about? We've talked about planning, prioritization. When you think forward, the things that get you fired up personally about what you're working towards, what lights your fire in the morning?
Yeah. So we have built, so one of our, so we have 3 BCOs for the year. I talked about this at the top. I'll tell you what they are. One of them is Be Ambitious. And the B in that is spelled B-E-E. You know, it's cute. Be Ambitious. The second is Build in Harmony, right? Which is let's build this thing together, and let's not otherize other departments as we do it. And then the last one is Become the Mission. And for a long time, Bambi's mission is to restore dignity in employment. And you can't be the mission right away. You got to build some blocks. You got to put, you got to slab the foundation. You got to get the window seals in. We're pushing this analogy is pushing my construction expertise to a limit. So I'll stop there. You got to get the framing. There we go. There's another one. And so and then you get to a point where you're ready to slab on the paint. The house is built. And you can really start to see what you've envisioned your home to be all these years. And so this is the year Bambi becomes the mission. We've got the infrastructure, the capital, the team, the customer base, and the talent internally to solve some of those things. We're building things that have been problems for small businesses that they didn't even know to ask for solutions against. For example, a wage and hour claim is something that may happen if someone that works the register doesn't take their lunch break and doesn't even tell you about it. And 3 months later, they can file a wage and hour claim for back wages for the amount of time that you owed them, plus a fee on top of that. Well, today, no payroll platform, Bambi has a payroll offering called Bambi Guided Payroll. No payroll offering helps you with that. They expect you to just know how to do it yourself. Well, this year, Bambi's payroll offering is launching a suite of features that automatically validate if someone has taken their meal breaks, and then they get them to sign off to release you of any responsibility after every check, so that 9 months after paying someone the wrong wage, you don't get hit with a $20,000 wage and hour bill. Nobody else does that, and no business owners ask for that. We just care deeply about the problems that clearly exist in the market, and we love to question the status quo. So if another payroll provider has not done it, you can assume that Bambi is trying to do it. And so I think the biggest things we're focused on are where to solve for pockets of value that are creating pain for business owners that everyone else has just ignored because they thought it was too hard, or maybe they just weren't creative enough, or hell, maybe they just didn't apply enough constraints.
We're a really connected and collaborative community of entrepreneurs here at
Carol, I'm losing you.
Did I cut out? Okay.
Losing you a bit. There we go. Yeah. Yep, okay. You're better.
Awesome. We've got this incredible community of entrepreneurs at HelloAlice. How can we step up to say thank you for your time and energy? We know you're super busy. How do we help you and help Bambi push forward and hit those goals that you all set out?
We want every business owner with less than 100 employees in the country to use Bambi. It is tremendously affordable. The value is insane. We don't always get it right, but man, are we working our asses off to try. And so, tell all your friends, share it with your customer base, share it with those users, and more importantly, send me feedback. I want feedback from as many people as possible. And I mean that, and I'll put my money where my mouth is. Allan, ALLAN, at Bambi.com. That's BAM to the BEE.com. And please shoot me any feedback, especially if you're a subscriber. I'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. Well, you've got some Bambi customers in the audience today. So you'll send your feedback to Allan. He wants it. Thank you, Allan, so much for the time and for sharing great advice. I got some notes and takeaways, and going to be applying as well. So appreciate it. Have an awesome 2023 and look forward to keeping the conversation going.
So much fun, man. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thanks, Alan. Bye-bye. All right, to everybody else, we'll see you back over on Zoom in just a moment. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.